Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sustainability and Food Systems, presented by myself, Jennifer Channon, and my colleague, Julie Scholes. We work at the Better Food Foundation, and our mission is to create sustainable food systems by incubating novel solutions for shifting diets and shaping cultural narratives that guide food choices. We envision a thriving world where plant-based food is the norm. And we do this by working in large institutions and communities that serve food to lots of people. And that's because we know that at least in the United States, more than 50% of meals are eaten outside of the home. And so leaders, decision makers in institutions like schools, hospitals, businesses, restaurants have a lot of power in shaping our food system. And we use strategies that come out of behavioral science in order to help food service settings foster this cultural shift towards more sustainable dining. I want to say a few words about myself. This is a photograph that I took outside of my home. A few years ago, my partner and I moved to this little town called Julian, California, which is in the mountains outside of San Diego. And what's unusual about where we live is that we live in an off-grid community. You can see our solar panels down below. 100% of our power comes from solar power. We also have a shared community well that we get all of our water from. And what this means is that we have to be really careful about how we expend our resources. We have to think about, can I run the toaster at the same time that I run the hot water kettle? And so we're always being mindful of our impact on energy usage. But what might surprise many people to learn is that living off grid is not the most impactful thing that we do for the environment. Actually, the most impactful thing we do has to do with how we eat. And by eating a plant-centered diet, we're actually doing more to lessen our impact on our ecosystem than anything else that we're doing in our home. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about our work at the Better Food Foundation. Now I'd like to hand you over to Julie, and she's going to talk about sustainability and food.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. Before we jump into sustainability in food, I want to give you a little introduction of myself as well. So I live in Venice Beach, where I spend most of my time in and on the ocean. This is me actually paddleboarding off the coast of Mexico in the Sea of Cortez. And I love this quote from a very famous diver, Jacques Cousteau: "People protect what they love." This is what has brought me to this work. Is I really love being in nature, in the environment, in the mountains, in the ocean. And this is really what connects me to the work that we do to protect our planet. But before I start on sustainability in food, I live in Los Angeles, so I want to acknowledge the ancestral and unceded lands of the Tongva, Chumash, and Tatviam nations in LA where I live. They've carried this land and water for generations. I also want to pay homage to the local farmers and workers that serve my region. I express my respect and gratitude to these communities. So let's start on sustainability in food. I always like to start with the Sustainable Development Goals. This was created by the UN in 2015, and it's a shared blueprint to address the 17 goals. These goals cover a variety of global challenges such as poverty, inequality, climate, environment, prosperity, peace, and justice. They acknowledge that sustainability isn't just one issue among many, but it connects everyone and every system on our planet, including our food system. Switching to a more plant-centered food system and away from animal agriculture is a way to address several of these goals. In the next few slides, we'll walk through that. So to start out with, on climate action, which is number 13, this graph illustrates the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions, which are causing global climate change. Our food systems currently account for a third of all global greenhouse gas emissions, but animal agriculture has a far greater climate impact. Emissions don't just take place on the farm. Producing meat, poultry, dairy, eggs, and fish also require intensive use of almost every industrial process that contributes to climate change, from coal mining, coal plants, and oil production to land transportation, landfill, and growing crops to feeding the animals and much more. And animal agriculture is responsible for 16.5% of those greenhouse gas emissions. This graph shows that all animal products emit more greenhouse gas emissions compared to plant-based foods. Across the supply chain, beef, lamb, cheese, shrimp, pork, poultry, farmed fish, and eggs far surpass any type of plant-based food by as much as 500%. Animal product emissions surpass the combined emissions of all the transportation sector as well. And that brings us to methane. Scientists have been warning us about this greenhouse gas. It's methane's a potent, and it's so potent it has the warming potential more than 80 times than CO2. Animal agriculture is responsible for 32% of global methane emissions. Methane is produced from the bodies of cows and sheep when they breathe fart and also from the manure. But that's not all. Wasted food is responsible for 58% of land methane emissions. And composting of animal products has 3 to 7 times more higher greenhouse gas emissions compared to plant-based materials. Plant-based diets help lower food waste carbon emissions. And for SDG number 15, which is life on land, we use a significant amount of land to produce animal products. Animal products provide just 37% of global protein and provide a mere 18% of the world's calories, yet are responsible for 83% farmed land, using 71% and causing for global deforestation. Think about it. In order to raise chickens, cows, and pigs, you have to feed them crops, and it takes land to grow those crops. So you're using far more land to raise animals than if we were just growing plants to eat. And on the graph on the right, it shows if everyone ate a plant-based diet, we would reduce the amount of land we use for agriculture by 75%. That's equal to the area the size of North America and Brazil combined. Imagine if that land were rewilded, restored, reforested, and turned to use that benefit the environment and all living things. And that takes us to life below water, number 14 and number 6, clean water and sanitation. Um, uh, about 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. We live on a blue planet. It's estimated that half of our oxygen comes from the ocean. Humans rely on a healthy ocean, and there are many threats to our oceans. First, our oceans are a major carbon sink, storing about 91% of excess heat from greenhouse gases, which warms the oceans, causes sea level rise, and coral bleaching in the sea. And then among 90% of our global marine wild fisheries are classified as exploited or overfished. And wild captured fisheries struggle without sound regulatory framework and strong enforcement. That leads us to bottom trawling and fish farming. As we see in the photos, they're destructive fishing methods. Bottom trawling uses weighted nets, some as large as football fields, dragging along the ocean floor, sweeping up many species along the way. And fish farming uses cages near offshore areas that leads to habitat destruction of mangroves and coral reefs and cause pollution from waste and chemicals in the local watershed. And it's estimated that plastic pollution will outweigh all fish in the sea by 2050. Shifting to plant-based eating includes reducing our consumption of seafood, especially farmed seafood products, which can relieve the pressure on our global fisheries to allow the ocean to recover and return to a thriving ecosystem. The environmental impact, we like to look at when we're talking about freshwater use between plant-based and dairy milk. Producing dairy milk uses considerably more water than producing any plant milks. As you can see in the graph, oat and soy use the least amount of fresh water, and dairy causes eutrophication also that you see on the right more than any other plant-based product. And that brings us to people. What is the most dangerous job in the US? Frontline factory farm workers. Sustainable development means a food system that creates no poverty, decent work, economic growth, and responsible consumption. Exploitation of frontline workers exists throughout the food system. It is especially bad in animal agriculture. They are the lowest paid laborers, yet they face the highest risk of injury, illness, and exploitation, are exposed to dangerous chemicals and pathogens. So that brings us to us. How do we be more responsible about our consumption at home, work, and school, and restaurants? Think about the labels at the grocery stores. Switching to buying animal products with labels like free range, organic, or regenerative is unfortunately not a great solution. Most of these labels are unregulated, so consumers don't actually know what they're buying. Sometimes they're just a marketing tactic to get customers to pay more for products that aren't better for the animals. Furthermore, even when producers really are using practices that are better in certain ways, like regenerative farming, it's not a solution for feeding the world. There just isn't enough land to produce the amount of meat we need to feed 8 billion people today using regenerative practices. And this is why Project Drawdown lists plant-rich diets as the fourth most important thing we can do to reverse global warming. The evidence is clear. A shift towards plant-based food is a leading solution for sustainable, healthy future. And what we need to reach the SDG goals for zero hunger, good health, and well-being for all, and stay under 1.5 degrees for a healthy planet. I'm going to pass it back over to Jennifer that's going to walk us through solutions.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Julie, for walking through some of the reasons why a shift towards a plant-based food system is important. I'm now going to talk about how we can actually achieve that vision. And I'm going to talk in particular about strategies that help us make plant-based food the easiest choice. And the name that's used for these strategies is nudges. Now, nudges have been around for a long time. Businesses have always tried to nudge consumers towards the choices that businesses want them to make. But in the book Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, they go in depth into how we can use nudges in order to solve social problems and to help people choose more socially responsible behaviors. So what a nudge is an intervention that gently steers individuals towards a desired action without forbidding their options. And you actually encounter nudges all the time, whether you know it or not. When you download an app, you might be automatically enrolled in security settings, and that's a form of nudge. When you go shopping, certain items are going to be placed where they're easier for you to see, and that's a nudge. In California, near where I live, a number of cities have switched to making green power sources their default power source so that people need to take an extra step if they want their power to come from less green sources. When you take a lot of nudges and you intentionally put them together in an environment, this is called choice architecture. By subtly shaping how options are presented, choice architecture influences individual decision-making, often without people's explicit awareness. Next time you go to the grocery store, pay attention to the choice architecture. Everything from where things are located, to what's written on signs, to the colors of the labels on products. All of these are nudges that have been intentionally designed in order to steer you towards certain choices rather than others. And chances are, those choices are not the ones that align best with your values, whether they be about sustainability or health or other values. The good news, though, is that you don't have to own a supermarket in order to be a choice architect. Anytime you serve food, you are a choice architect, and you can design the way that food is served in ways that makes plant-based food the easiest choice for people. Next, I'm going to go through what the top 5 nudges we've found are that are most effective to get people to choose plant-based foods. And the top nudge is defaults. Plant-based defaults are the simplest and most successful nudge. And they work by making the best choice the easiest choice. When plant-based food is the default, it requires diners to take an extra step to opt in for animal products. But it leaves animal products as an option for those who really want them. Defaults are extremely simple, flexible, and cost-effective to use. And one of the reasons they're so effective is because they influence social norms. Behavioral scientists have come to understand that people are much more likely to do what they believe others in their community are doing. So when plant-based food is the default, it sends the message that plant-based food must be normal, popular, it's what other people are going to choose. And so diners are much more likely to choose it themselves. This graph shows a summary of studies that took place at 13 universities that tested what happened when they made plant-based food the default in either cafeterias or catered events. On the left side, you see what happened in the control group when plant-based food was not the default. It was just served the way you were probably most used to it being served. And in this case, less than 32% of people, sometimes less than 5% of people, chose plant-based meals. On the right side, this shot up to more than 55%, sometimes as high as 90% of people choosing plant-based meals. And the only difference was that they had to take an extra step to opt into animal products because plant-based meals were the default. This doesn't just work in universities. Defaults have been used very effectively in hospitals. In a pilot done a few years ago, 11 New York City hospitals switched to serving plant-based meals as the default. And it not only led to a dramatic increase in people choosing plant-based meals, it saved the hospital money, almost $500,000 per year. It led to a 90% diner satisfaction rate. It reduced their food-related greenhouse gas emissions. And it was so successful that now this strategy is in the process of being expanded to hundreds more hospitals. If you want to learn more in detail how to do this in a cafeteria or dining hall setting, we recommend you read the study Serving Up Plants by Default. This was the study done with Sodexo at 3 universities that found that when they made plant-based meals the default in dining halls, it led to an increase of what had been 30.8% of students to 81.5% of students choosing plant-based meals. Again, having a significant impact on food-related greenhouse gas emissions. And this was so successful that Sodexo has chosen to expand the pilot to all of its 400 university operations in North America. This is an image from that study of what it looks like in practice. You'll see that the meal that students see when they line up for food is a plant-based meal. It's the tofu tiki masala. However, there's a sign that they can see right above it that says that chicken tiki masala is also available. They just need to ask for it. A reason why universities are embracing this approach is because plant-based food is much more friendly to students with allergies. By serving plant-based food, they're eliminating the top 4 out of 9 food-related allergies. And so it makes dining operations simpler to run when the majority of the food you serve is going to be accessible to most students. The simplest place to use plant-based defaults is actually events, and that's because all you need to do is change the registration form. So on the left, we have a real-world example from Houston Community Climate Summit. This is the kind of language that you might use if you're inviting people to an event over email. It says, as part of our commitment to reducing environmental impact, etc., plant-based meals will be served by default at this summit. Chicken or gluten-free can be provided upon request. We will do our best to accommodate. So then people simply need to send an email if they want the chicken. On the right is an event registration like you might see for a wedding or for a party. And it says the buffet will be plant-based and gluten-free. Chicken is available upon request. Please indicate dietary requests. So everyone still has a choice if they want animal products or not, but we're sending the message that plant-based food is the norm. Coffee shops are another place where plant-based defaults are rapidly spreading. On the left is an example from the University of Michigan, which has switched to making oat milk the default milk in all of their campus cafes. And that's because of all the available plant milks. It's the one with the lowest carbon emissions. A number of coffee shop chains like Stumptown and Blue Bottle have also switched to oat milk as their default, as well as cafes on a number of college campuses. Similarly, major chains like Starbucks and Tim Hortons and Pete's, as well as several universities, has taken the step to remove their upcharge for plant-based milks so that all of their milks cost the same. And again, this is because oat milk is the lowest carbon emitting milk of all the options. Plant-based defaults have also been successfully used in corporate settings. This is data from a study that was done in LinkedIn several years ago. After defaults, the next most powerful nudge is ratios. When you use climate-friendly ratios, you are making the best choice the most abundant choice. And we encourage you to use a minimum 2-to-1 ratio of plant-based foods to animal-based foods. And this is because, like with defaults, we want to influence social norms. We want people to see that plant-based foods are the majority, and that sends the subtle message that they must also be good, be popular, and be encouraged. And folks want to do what they see other people doing. Here's an example of what climate-friendly ratios look like on a menu. In the shareable section, you'll see that 5 out of 6 of the items are plant-based, and only one of the items, chicken tenders, has animal products in it. This menu uses quite a number of other nudges successfully as well, but this is a restaurant that a group can go to, and if people want animal products, they can still have them, but they're going to feel strongly encouraged to try the super delicious plant-based offerings too. Nudge number 3 is prime placement. This makes the best choice the most convenient choice. It increases the visibility of plant-based foods. And we like this nudge because it's extremely simple and intuitive to implement. Placement is easy to use in buffet style settings. And what it does, what you would do in a buffet is simply put your plant-based meals at the front of the buffet in line before people get to the meat options. And if you want to go a step further, prepare meals that can be plant-based, like for example, a bean chili or a tofu curry, and offer animal products as something that they can add on as a garnish at the end, rather than something that's mixed into the meal itself. Nudge number 4 is subtle substitutions. When we use subtle substitutions, we swap ingredients with plant-based alternatives, such as mayo, butter, milk, and egg replacements. This is an especially useful strategy to use with condiments, desserts, and other baked goods, because it can make whole swaths of your menu plant-based by default, and most diners won't be able to tell the difference in these items. We're in a time where we have a lot of excellent plant-based alternatives to animal products, especially eggs, milk, and butter. And what we encourage is that you do some research and find the plant-based alternatives that are going to be the most affordable, available, and culturally appropriate for the institution that you are working with. There was a really great case study of substitutions that took place with the Cherry Creek School District. They switched out all the animal ingredients in their baked goods with plant-based milk powder and eggs. This had a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and it also saved the school district money. Finally, nudge number 5 is tasty titles. This means that we change the names of menu items to titles and descriptions that sound good, that are enticing, that encourage people to get them. We focus on taste, texture, and provenance. So instead of calling something the vegetarian wrap or the vegan wrap, we might call it the Mediterranean curried chickpea wrap or the protein-packed chipotle tofu wrap. The goal is to make people want to eat the plant-based meals, whether or not they identify as vegan or vegetarian. Here's just some examples from my local community of creative titles that restaurants have used for plant-based meals. My favorite is the good soup, because who doesn't want to try a soup that the restaurant says is good? We offer a guide that you will have access to called Say This, Not That, of the kinds of language that you can use. Instead of emphasizing what is missing from a meal or emphasizing that it's vegetarian or vegan, emphasize what the meal has, what it's rich in, how delicious it is, what benefit people get. So to recap, the top 5 nudges are plant-based defaults, and this is the most powerful nudge, climate-friendly ratios, prime placement, subtle substitutions, and tasty titles. But these are actually just the tip of the iceberg, and you can get creative. In your dining setting, think about all the ways you can nudge people towards plant-based eating. An acronym you might think of is FEAST. And that is, are you making plant-based foods fun for people to access? Are you making them easy for people to access? Are you making them accessible, such as putting them in a central location? Are you offering them in a way that's social so that people can share, maybe take pictures and spread it on social media? And are you using these nudges in a timely way? For example, at the start of the year when people might be setting their health resolutions, or the start of a school year when people are shaping their habits. Finally, if you're going to try out nudges in your institution, be mindful about how you communicate about them. One of the benefits of nudges is that they avoid the pushback that we often receive when we take away people's choices. And that makes them easy to implement and less controversial. We encourage you to implement nudges quietly, and that the best time to promote a nudge initiative is actually after you've piloted it, after you've tested it out, and you have some data that shows that it did in fact lead to more people choosing plant-based food, and that it was popular and that you maintained high diner satisfaction. Because we know there's negative stereotypes about plant-based foods, and it's better to show that this initiative was popular and that people were happy with it rather than giving them the opportunity to worry in advance that there's going to be pushback. But then once you have those results, please share them, because we are spreading the idea that plant-centered dining is in fact easy and popular, and we should all embrace it. You can learn more in this document, The Research on Nudges, Plant-Based Defaults Work. It summarizes dozens of studies, and so if you want to find data to back up any of these nudges, you'll find it in this document. Thank you for attending this presentation.